Okay, so you are recording.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is a packed agenda, and thanks for attendees who joined early this week. So let's start with our vision and charge. So I don't know if people looked at the IPCC report that came up, and it actually talked about a 50% chance that global temperatures would increase to that 1.5 Celsius. So the reason why we're here is to, again, work cooperatively and also work with a sense of urgency. So just want to highlight that. In terms of our charge, we can recommend programs and policies to the town manager, to the town council, and obviously continue to educate the community. It's all important for us. The town manager goals, we talked about it. I think everyone's familiar with this by now. Pretty much the same CCA and the waste hauler bylaw, the PACE program, everything that we're working on are part of the town manager's goals for 2023. And our execution enablers haven't changed. We're still on the top 5 pillars that we've identified. And then in terms of metrics, Stephanie, I don't know how many participants we had over the last 2 meetings because I missed them. Please let me know and I'll add it. Again, that's something that we still need to improve on, and hopefully we have more people today as part of our EV 101. From an education series standpoint, we have 1 today, so there'll be 5. We're tracking to our goal for 10 this year. And then the annual report, I'll try to get that started this month and maybe complete it before June if possible. And Stephanie, just a heads up on the expense report that is due in August to report out. And then goals discussion will happen in May, right after the annual report is published. In terms of open action items, Stephanie, you had one here, connecting with mass development on PACE.
Yeah, I did that. So, and that happened while you were away.
Okay.
They are tweaking the program, and so they didn't want to do any outreach at this time, major outreach, because the program is going to change. So rather than do a presentation where they then have to update with more information, they would rather wait until the program's been updated and then have something then. So that kind of put us off a little bit. So we're waiting on them, but I do have contact and we did connect. So we definitely, they're interested. They just want to wait.
Okay. Is there a specific action here that I can add, Stephanie, that we can track to?
I would just say maybe, I mean, it's in process. You know, it's pending.
Or I'll just say reconnect here.
Yeah, reconnect is good.
And leave it at that. Okay, so this is also done, I assume then. So I'll just get rid of this. Right, Stephanie?
Yeah, Don and I did that.
Yeah, okay. PACE flyer. This is also pending, or
that's really Don actually was working on that primarily.
Yeah, I remember Don shared this about a month and a half ago at this meeting. Let me put his name. Don's not here, right?
I haven't seen him.
Okay. Okay, and then reconnecting with the town manager on the specialized code and asking the town to adopt it. I did reach out to the town manager again before I left on vacation, but if every one of you can do that, reach out to the town councilors. That we need this. We need this process to start, I believe, in June, because it's a 6-month process, and if we want this adopted in the next calendar year, at the start of next calendar year, it needs to start in June. So this is a priority for us. So please reach out to your town councilors. Any questions on this? I'm just going to leave this as an important item that we can all track to. So please do reach out. We have this as part of the agenda today to review the letter to the 2 DPU members, but Andra is out. So we will add it to our next agenda. And then I'm not sure if this action item was done around reviewing the this website. I believe this was the Springfield initiative. I'm not sure if this was discussed at all, Lori.
Yeah, we didn't have time for it on the agenda this week, and I hadn't had time to work on it last week because of the Building Energy Conference. So I was going to bring it next week to talk about it. It's a little later than we liked, but let's talk about it next week.
Okay, sounds good. And then we got this done. So thanks, Laura, for leading it. And then this happened on Saturday. So thank you, Don. Don was there, but not in the picture. And who's missing? Dwayne's missing as well. So huge shout out to Stephanie for putting the whole thing together. It was pretty impressive. And also Lori for leading this. So thank you both, and everybody else for participating. And I just showed up towards the end, so I didn't do anything. It was all Lori and everybody else here at the photo. Okay. I will move on to the next part of the agenda.
So you need a note taker.
Yes. Who took the minutes last time, Lori?
I haven't done it in a while, so I don't mind doing it. I'm set up for it if no one else wants to do it. I don't know whose turn it is. But I know last week I asked someone else to do it because I was running the meeting. I don't know if it was my turn or not.
So last time was Laura, April 12th. So Jesse is not here.
Yeah, he is.
Don's.
I think Jesse's done it recently. Who
Oh
did
no,
it?
Jesse. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Jesse did at the meeting before, Laura.
Yeah, that is true. Stella, is Stella here?
Don and
Stella's-
Stella aren't here, so.
Yeah, Lori, I guess, yeah, if you can take it on, and then we'll have Don and Stella do it.
Happy to do it.
Thank you.
Did this meeting started a half hour earlier than typical?
Correct. And that was in when I sent you the meeting packet, I highlighted that in bold, that it was starting earlier.
I wonder if we might see more people at 4:30.
I'm thinking we will.
I think we'll certainly see more at 5:30. And there are 4 attendees right now, which is, hello, pretty good.
I think we're just thinking about our members too.
Oh, our own members. Yeah.
It's-
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Lori, for taking the minutes. All right, let's move on to the next part of the agenda then. Well, it's actually to vote on minutes. So did everybody get a chance to review the minutes?
I move we accept them as they are.
And I second.
Thank you.
Okay, and via voice vote in no particular order, Roof,
Yes.
Goldner,
Yes.
Breger,
Yes.
Drucker,
Yes.
Selman,
Yes,
and Raghavan.
Abstain.
Minutes are approved.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, time for public comments. Does anyone in the public have any comments?
If anyone is interested in speaking, please electronically raise your hand and I will unmute you.
Okay, no takers. Let's move on to the next topic. Adrian, if you want to lead us off.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I am here today to share the results of our townwide solar assessment outreach effort. This slideshow has been shared with you all, and all of the results that I'm showing today, as well as some others, are included in the report that will be available to Stephanie soon. So if you feel I went over something quickly, you will be able to see those results in the report, and the report will have all of the unsummarized, unedited data as well.
Question, were these slides in the packet? Because maybe I forgot to download them, but I don't seem to have them.
They're in the packet now. I didn't send them to you, but they're in the packet online and you can get them after the they don't have to be in the packet ahead of time, as long
Okay.
as you get them right after the meeting.
Okay, great, as long as they're there, thanks.
Great. So we had 16 responses on Engage Amherst, as well as 2 additional email responses. We also had 508 survey responses. So that feels pretty good. And about 30 participants at our 2 interactive workshops. Those workshops were the same, so that's cumulative. We had a much larger showing at the Saturday workshop and a smaller evening workshop participation. To summarize quickly from our Engage Amherst and emailed input, we asked kind of what are you most excited and concerned about? So an open-ended question to just get people thinking and responding. And you'll see these themes come up throughout all of our questions, but people were excited about solar generally. They were excited about roofs and parking lots. And then also excited about some of the social aspects, the level of community interest, reaching net zero, and multiple people voiced pride and hope in being a model town. The concerns were about agricultural and forest conversion, as well as pricing and logistics, some concerns about tax increases and fees. And then some concerns that maybe tools such as community aggregation were going underutilized and could be leaned on to increase solar uptake. And people also put in what they want more, which is great. So they want more consultation by the town with farmers and foresters about using farm and forest land. They want more education on solar generally and on other ongoing developments, and more decentralized, smaller developments versus fewer large developments. As we turn to our survey, I first want to go over the demographics quickly. I don't think that they're entirely surprising, but 95% of our participants are owners. That's primarily single-family homeowners with some apartment and condo owners, and 5% were renters. Most people who answered our survey had lived in Amherst for more than 10 years, with only 5% living here less than 2 years. And interestingly, 2% said they don't live in Amherst and completed the survey. So these may be people who work in Amherst or own a business. And then our ages who participated, 43% were over 65 years old, with another 40% between 45 and 60. So 3% of our participants were less than 35 years old, but 1% of that 1% of the total is under 18. So a little bit of teenager interest, which I think it's personally, I find very exciting. They're engaged at the municipal level. As we move into our survey, we had it divided into general sections. So the first was general attitudes. 59% of people who came to the survey were already aware of the emissions targets, but that means that 49% learned about the town's emission targets by completing the survey. So it seems to be a helpful outreach tool. Even though a large percentage of people just learned about the targets that day, they still felt they were important. 88% said they were very important or important. And again, when asked about their top benefits, people identified reducing fossil fuel use, balancing renewable development with natural area protection, and slowing climate change as the top benefits of solar. And their top concerns were, again, that conversion of forest land and farmland, as well as initial costs. For small scale development and residential development, we asked participants if they use solar energy at their homes, and about 50% do. I think that, we likely tapped into early uptake solar users. So we see that about 36% of our participants have solar panels on their property, with smaller percentages either having a renewable supplier through their utility or being part of a community solar program. For those who said no, that about 50% who said no, we asked why not. And the largest reason was that their homes don't have adequate exposure, or that the upfront costs are too high. With a not insignificant number, 16% saying the process is too confusing. So this may open up some windows for education and increased uptake. We also asked, for those people who solar is not really feasible on their homes, if they would be interested in purchasing shares of a community solar program. This is clearly a hypothetical question. We don't have a community solar program that we pointed to, but still about 50% of people said, yes or likely yes. And another 28% were on the fence. They would need more information, which is absolutely understandable. With only 25% saying they're probably not interested in community solar. And pretty strong results that the town should assist lower income individuals in developing solar.
Adrian, the 25% not interested in community solar is probably reflects the fact that half of them already have on their roof.
Absolutely. Yep, they already have it on their roof. Interestingly, throughout this, the results, you'll see there's kind of maybe a 5%, 7% response of like not interested. So some of our respondents did take the survey to say, I'm not interested in this. So that does show up, or no preference about solar, that shows up throughout, but most participants had pretty keen interest and opinions that they were expressing. So I went through those ones pretty quick. They're relatively straightforward. I wanted to save some of my time here for the more complex questions where they were ranking, just because there's a lot more kind of data to show and sift through and think about. So this was the first ranking question, which said, where would you most prefer to see large solar developments? So your first would be the most preferred. And we see here quite a bit of canopy and then rooftop. So canopy is the most preferred, but rooftops really close behind, with the second preference being, mostly rooftop with some canopy. Once those already built environments were exhausted as a selection, then people generally selected at 81% the semi-developed. So that's, roadside, some open spaces near existing infrastructure and buildings. Following the use of semi-developed land is where we start to see much more agriculture, but 30% open space as well. And that open space did specifically include forest. So that was other unbuilt environments. And then finally, the least preferred really is the open space. Throughout these graphs, you may notice that the no preference increases once a user selected no preference. Any ranking underneath that was disregarded because they had said, I don't care from here, from this point on, no preference. To really get at the crux of the issue, because we understand that there's broad support for development of solar on the built environment, we specifically asked for participants to rank their preferences regarding the unbuilt environment. When push comes to shove, where would they like to see solar? And this is much more mixed, as we might expect. So the most preferred would be dual use agriculture. But you might notice that 31% here said nowhere. I know we had a discussion, maybe with this group and certainly with the solar bylaw group, of recognizing that no development is an option and that could jeopardize reaching the emission reduction targets. And so a little bit of language was in that question, and still 31% of respondents said no development at all in the unbuilt environment. We then see, as we move into the second most preferred location was agricultural land with dual use still heavily prevalent. And then moves more towards the open space. Here, open space was more meadows and other grasslands or shrubland. And forest was its own category, since we know there are strong sentiments in town about forests. So forest appears to be generally least preferred, with dual use agriculture and then traditional use of agricultural land being the most preferred if solar must be built on the unbuilt environment. Regarding the solar zoning bylaw and how it could apply to large-scale developments, we asked about 10 questions. So they are not all shown here because it is a little bit overwhelming, just the number of bars. But I did want to point out a couple nuances that come out of these questions. So the first question says this zoning bylaw should create strict regulations on where solar can be constructed. And, you know, about 75% of respondents agreed with that statement, that they think it should prescribe where solar can go. But that next question, the solar zoning bylaw should create a new layer of review for solar projects. That only has about 50% agreement. And so this, you know, I interpret this that there's more support for prescribing where solar can go, or maybe setting performance standards a solar project needs to meet, versus adding additional review processes to solar development. And I think that that's echoed in the last two questions, where we see a fair amount of agreement that solar should be reviewed the same as other land developments. But when we asked if there should be no additional zoning requirements, kind of flipped it on its head, we see that 50% disagreement. So this is interesting to me that you know, 50% is still quite a bit of support, but it's a little bit more mixed when it comes to changing the process, while there's more consensus around prescribing where solar could or couldn't go. And then we see, again, pretty big support on these middle two questions, which is that any review process for solar should be progressive with the size of the development, and that there should be a minimum size under which the solar zoning bylaw would not apply. And we understand here that current regulations, the Wetland Protection Act, stormwater standards, those would still apply. And then our next category was really about municipal development. So as the town considers solar projects, when do people want to be involved? And here it was a select all that applies. So these responses don't add up to 100. But we see that really early on, about 50% of our respondents, they want to know about the project really as soon as it's conceived, as soon as the site's selected, when there's a conceptual plan. So they want to know early on, and then a fair number of people, you know, want to be involved throughout the process and be updated. Here's what I pointed out, you know, 7% here, they don't want to be engaged. They want the town to just do what the town needs to do. And so we did also ask, what are the top 3 questions people have when the town is going to propose a solar development? And people wanted to know explicitly how the proposed development would advance the climate goals. They wanted to know who was responsible for the long-term maintenance and decommissioning of the project. And they wanted to understand how much the project would cost and how much the project would save the town. At our interactive workshop, I know several of the members here attended. We had 6 kind of self-paced activities for people to participate in. And so the first one was, how do you feel? Where users, based on a photo of different types of solar development, could put in, an emotion word, a feeling word. So here was forest cutting to support a solar development. And We see the most votes under angry, worried, frustrated. But interestingly, there's 5 people who felt, or 4 people, my mistake, who felt neutral or happy about this. I think they don't feel happy about the trees. They feel happy about the solar development. So that kind of stood out to me. Dual use, we saw earlier, dual use was pretty highly rated in terms of use of the unbuilt environment. And we see that here too. 11 happy votes. Also, people were curious. There were a lot of questions about what is dual use, what counts as dual use, kind of how does that work? Traditional solar as a primary use of agricultural land. Here, the scale is different. If you note, we had a lot more diversity of answers here, but the max number of votes was 4 versus 10 or 11 on the others. So mixed sentiment on farmland. And then the canopy parking lots, that was highly voted. One person was curious, but everybody else felt pretty happy and relieved about it. Another activity had this graphic, this cartoon of different types of solar with call outs for people to prioritize and rate where they would like to see it, first, second, and third. And again, unsurprisingly, we see a lot of canopy solar and rooftop, followed by that dual use, and then ground mounted, but not in a forest. There also were quite a few kind of write-in clarifications on this activity. So that was really great to have people kind of expressing their opinion outside of the set activity. And so all of those results are in the report. People added kind of clarification on some of their preferences. Big questions was really just an opportunity for people to voice their questions about kind of what do they want to know? What are they thinking about? And so some of these questions might look very familiar to this group, but questions about, is there state financial support generally? Again, what about those homes that can't support solar themselves? Under Amherst solar questions, we got, again, how does the community solar programs, how do they work? And here I know you all are working on this one. How many megawatts do we as a community use? And how much area would that take to reach our goals? There were also calls for thinking about Amherst regionally. How can we encourage action in other towns? And how can we coordinate more directly with other communities? There were quite a few comments actually about the Hampshire Mall and those parking lots. How can we get solar on those parking lots in Hadley? Here, this was another kind of free-form Q&A, and so things people are excited about with solar. Again, happy to be providing for the future, happy to be weaning ourselves off fossil fuels. There was a participant who's, interested to see some type of financial requirements of developers to help ensure responsible development and compliance with permit requirements. And then looking to how to get state and federal support to support parking lot development, canopy development, which we know is generally a more expensive form of solar development. The rain clouds, I think, highlights the balancing act that we're all walking as we transition to renewable energy. So we had one participant worried about hasty or careless decisions, and another participant worried we're not moving fast enough. We had concerns about loss of farmland, impacts on water, loss of forests, and others saying too many restrictions on possible solar. So this, I felt, just really highlighted the tightrope we're walking, and that you all are specifically navigating. We also asked generally, what do you value most about living in Amherst? So here we had a few options already, pre-filled that people could vote on, and then also write-in options. So we see that people really value wildlife, diverse wildlife, outdoor recreation. Salamanders got a few votes just by itself. Even more specifically than other wildlife. But we also see quite a few votes in conservation, fresh food and agriculture were well represented, as well as community education and equity. So those values certainly came through in our workshop. And our final activity at the workshop, we called it reasonable requirements, and these were possible types of requirements that could be in the solar bylaw. These were intentionally left broad to avoid any implication that these were in the bylaw, would be. We didn't want to be very technical, but did want to understand general attitudes and sentiment. So here we see a variety of, no clear cutting forests, but we also see very limited tree removal or no tree removal. So that was a recurring preference that showed up. And so there was also, many votes for putting requirements on developments for parking lots and new non-residential buildings, but we didn't see here any votes for requiring it on residential buildings. And elsewhere, we saw some concerns that there might be too many requirements on homeowners. So that's something that didn't make it into this question. So I think that's pretty internally consistent with our results. So thank you all for hanging with me. I know that was a big data dump. I think there's a lot of conclusions that can be teased out of those results, and it does take some looking and thinking pretty closely about it. But I appreciate all of your attention.
Thanks, Adrian. This was fantastic. Really nice work. Any questions from ECAC? So Adrian, what are the next steps here?
So this actually, we are very close to the end of our contract and commitments with the town. So we were specifically retained to generate data, to generate these results, but not move into the conclusion phase. So we are wrapping up the final report, which has both the assessment process in a fair amount of detail, as well as the results, both in a summarized graphical format and, like I said, the full tabulated data. And that will be provided to the town soon. We have provided the assessment mapping data to the town, and we're working with the GIS manager there to get that map up and running so that it is publicly usable and accessible. But then that is it for here. The data is going to be with you all.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much for the support. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you all for your attention.
Overall, just it seems like a positive feedback to fight climate change, and I think I felt there was the similar theme on Earth Day as well. I think there was a lot of people who knew how to fight climate change. In some cases, education. I think you brought up education a couple of times. I think Solar 101 would be great, and also how do you install solar in your home? The process was complex, is what you identified as well. So some things for us to work on. Steve?
Yeah, Adrian, were you pleased with the number of responses, the 508?
I was pleased. Yeah, I mean, we did put a lot of effort into getting the word out there, and I think 508. We were pleased with that.
And based on the demographic response, does that seem, I don't know, what's your sense in terms of being a representative slice of Amherst?
I think, like all outreach, we would have liked to see more diversity in how long people had lived in town, and also their ages, to see that we were engaging more Gen Z and millennials. So we would have loved to see more diversity, but I think having 508 is pretty good and fairly representative compared to, how many people we see at public meetings and at in-person events.
Right, yeah.
We didn't have a question on income, right? And we don't have that. Okay, okay.
Yeah, I
Lori?
worry though that I think you said only 5% were renters, so, and half of them have solar on the roof, which tells you right there that this was a pretty rich crowd.
Yeah,
And I worry that this 30% that, doesn't, or even 50% that doesn't want things touched and that wants everything on rooftops are the folks who can afford it. So I do worry about that being a very slanted outcome. I was not thrilled with the demographics there. Doesn't look like it really represents the community.
Laura.
I kind of agree with that, Lori, but I think we need to be careful assuming that all homeowners are wealthy and that all people with solar are wealthy. I'm volunteer for the credit union, and I believe like a lot more than 50% of the solar loans they give out are for low income qualified. So they're definitely homeowners, but we can't say anything about their income without more information.
Thanks, Laura. Okay. Steve?
I guess one other thing, when I took the survey, I was a little disappointed at the very end after the survey was submitted, there was a prompt to submit another response. And I believe we were told that beforehand, there was no way to track submissions, no way to detect ballot box stuffing. So I think one thing we have to keep in mind is we don't know for sure that these are all individual responses.
We don't know for sure that they're all individual, but we also didn't want to say, only one member of a family could submit a survey. So, maybe partners took it, one and then the next.
That to me is I didn't realize that, and I don't know how I missed that, but that is a pretty serious flaw.
We,
There
specifically.
are ways to do that. I mean, at very least, you can collect email addresses and make sure you don't get the same email address twice or something.
We very specifically didn't want to collect, identifiable information in case that dissuaded people from taking the survey.
Some survey tools can do that by putting cookies on a browser's list. So you don't have to collect personal information, but you can still detect if the same browser submitted more than once, which is
Right.
halfway there. But yeah, as soon as you decide it's going to be an anonymous survey, you kind of give up that sort of control over or prevention of the ballot box stuffing, to be blunt.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if we're going to go back and redo any of the survey questions. So this is the information we have. Steve, how does this, or Dwayne, how does this change things with the solar bylaw process with all the information that you saw? Anything at all?
Well, I think we have, with the caveats that we just went over in terms of not the demographics are probably a bit skewed, but again, we do the best we can. Likewise with the ballot box stuffing, I think the issue with obviously folks for good reason are very interested in solar on canopies and rooftops and so forth. Whether that gets us, in terms of the other part of the work that Adrian's doing, which will come later, I guess, in the report is, how many kilowatts or megawatts can we actually do in Amherst on those type of sites. I will say that Adrian is scheduled to give the same presentation essentially or discussion with the bylaw group on Friday, so it will be discussed amongst the members there as well.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, great. Thanks again, Adrian.
Great,
Appreciate
thank
your
you
time.
all.
Okay, we'll turn it over to Don for ACE updates.
I mean, you weren't here at the last meeting. and I think everybody knows, Stephanie and I met with the executive director of the chamber, who seemed excited about putting on or hosting along with us an event. What we're really waiting on is the updated guidelines from Mass Development related to the now new construction, and they've really communicated directly with Stephanie, and I don't want to, if you can explain it better, Stephanie, that's fine. But until such time as they've completed their regulations or their guidelines, that any flyer of ours is kind of premature, because it won't have the information that it needs to have until that information is updated properly. So that's where that stands. We're waiting on them. Stephanie, do you have any idea from them as to their timeline for that?
No, they didn't really say. They thought they were hoping the guidelines might be updated by May, but I think it's one of those things where, you know, they have a process and it might take longer than they thought. So we have the contact information, and we're just going to be paying attention to when they release that information.
Okay. Thanks, Don.
Yep.
Anything else, Don, or is that it for updates? Okay, looks like that's it. Dwayne, I'll turn it over to you for solar updates.
Yeah, no, certainly no formal update, but basically what's going on with solar in my mind is the solar bylaw working group. We continue to meet. We do have next meeting on Friday. Last meeting, we had an interesting conversation and a presentation conversation with Jonathan Thompson from the Harvard Forest, specifically about the work that he's leading up with the Audubon, Mass Audubon, with regard to solar and forests, particularly. He did provide some useful perspectives with regard to solar and forests, presented an interesting calculator he's working on with regard to the carbon impacts and the comparative impacts of carbon from a forest, carbon benefits you get from a forest versus carbon benefits you would get from quote unquote mowing down the forest and putting up solar. And it's kind of interesting. And I know several people have looked at this. He's actually in the process of soon to publish. It sounds like a calculator, an interactive calculator that should be helpful. The answer is that it depends on a number of different parameters, which his calculator can control for. But generally, obviously he did particularly distinguish, which I think is useful, the difference between carbon in the carbon stocks in the forest, which is basically the carbon that is already sequestered in the forest, in the wood, primarily in the wood, and that is as opposed to the flux or carbon sequestration of a forest that occurs on an annual basis by the growth of the forest. He did make clear that the scale of these things are quite different. The amount of stock of carbon already in the stock is much larger than the sequestration rate on a year-by-year basis. And so when you potentially cut down a forest, not just for solar, for any purpose, you're really giving up the main thing that you're impacting is that carbon stock. But that depends on what you do with the wood. He did, if you are able to find marketable uses for that wood, and it stays in housing, lumber, furniture, whatever, then then at least a portion of that carbon stock stays sequestered. Obviously, you do give up the annual sequestration, but that's generally, at least in the case of solar, is much more substantial carbon benefits from the displaced fossil fuel. That being said, he sort of suggested that as the grid becomes more and more renewable, that tends to go down. But at the same time, that we sort of push back a little bit on that with regard to whether that is really taking into account the average emissions rate of the ISO New England grid, or potentially more appropriately, the marginal rate of that. As we scrub out on the margin, we're scrubbing out the fossil fuel. He also indicated that, yes, while if you can find markets to keep this timber in marketable products and keep it in timber, that at least in the case of solar development, where you're talking about, 5, 10, 20, 30 acres, but the same would be with housing, I would think, that it is difficult market-wise for land clears to go to the quote unquote trouble of finding markets for that supply, that relatively small quantity of wood product. And it's not atypical that the timber and the wood from this type of forest clearing ends up being chipped and left on the ground, which does not stay sequestered for that long. And so that's something interesting to think about. It's not limited to solar development, but to relatively small scale development. So that was an interesting outcome. I think he did indicate that he with Mass Audubon is working on a GIS evaluation of this in parallel to what the state DOER is doing. And so it'll be interesting to see both of those products when they become available. I'm blocking on sort of the dates or the time frame of that, but we're still a ways off, I suspect. And I guess on some of his parting comments, that sort of stuck with me was that, he coming from the forestry background and to some extent Mass Audubon, they were sort of more suggesting that as we do need to develop more and more solar and there is going to be some need for land use, his parting thoughts were, let's try to use land that's already deforested, open land. And so then it becomes sort of an additional mind-boggling conflict about, okay, are we better off using some of our open lands, meadows, as was mentioned before, and so forth, which may turn out to be more visible aesthetically to people, as opposed to clearing some in a forest and that's in the middle of a forest that people won't see as predominantly. So that was also, from his forestry background, he's sort of more enamored with using up some of the open land already, obviously with the focus more on already somewhat disturbed land, certainly landfills, brownfields, and so forth, but also sort of open land that's already deforested, primarily because you're not giving up that carbon stock of the trees that would have to come down. So there's some interesting remarks. We actually then didn't really have time to dig into our real work, which is reviewing the bylaw and developing the bylaw language. So we have committed ourselves to start in earnest, keep making progress on that, which we'll continue to do on Friday. Christine Bestrup in the planning department is leading that and has some stuff ready for us to go for Friday. We'll we'll spend some time as well with Adrian at GZA as well.
Thanks, Fred. Jessica?
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne, for the update. Did any mention of soil carbon, which is my understanding is someone that's constantly trying to source wood, like I think the soil carbon is a big player in that. So if there's any math to be done, I think that has to be part of it. And then chipped wood or rotting wood, that may not be carbon. I'm sure you know all this. I'm just saying it out loud. The way that because of the various bacteria and ways that it degrades, it could be other gases emitted into the atmosphere that are more potent than carbon. So that's just wood left on the ground. And then the third quick comment is open meadows and fields have enormous potential for rapid renewables, where huge amounts of carbon are grown on an annual cycle and then sequestered without doing damage to the soil carbon. So it makes, so just a couple of super high level things that I did not hear as
Yeah,
part of that.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. He did touch on the soil carbon. And I have to look back at my notes on that. I'm not sure if Steve recalls anything about that. My sense is that the carbon that's in the soil would generally remain in the soil if you cut down the forest and put up solar, as long as you don't do a lot of disturbance of the ground. Then again, there is obviously a sequestration of additional carbon soil as roots grow and leaf litter turns into soil and so forth as well, and you would give that up. But I'm blocking on the specifics of and whether he talked about that in detail.
Lori?
Yeah, I have a sort of related concern that I didn't hear discussed either, Dwayne, which is that we do log in Massachusetts and we don't always log in nice ways. And I can give a really good example that I ran into just about a year ago. I took a hike on what I thought was the New England Trail. I didn't realize it had been rerouted from the Leverett Food Co-op to Atkins Reservoir, and ended up bushwhacking through miles of ruined, clear cut, just run over, destroyed forest. I was appalled because it's not land that, like Amethyst Brook, when they log in there, they're a little more careful, right? But this is not land that anybody would go on unless they were trying to do the stupid thing I did and following an old map. And I mean, it's destroyed, it's gone. We do this every 60 years on state forest. Why, what about using that land? If we're going to keep doing that, we shouldn't keep doing that, but if we keep doing that, did he touch on that issue, that we log these lands anyway?
I'm not sure about explicitly that. I did raise the issue of, if to the extent that some of the products could go to marketable, merchantable timber, then, is it reasonable to assume that somewhere else in New England or the US, that if we don't provide lumber or restrict this product from going into markets, then somewhere else the demand for lumber and so forth will be served by cutting down trees somewhere else. So there's that sort of issue. But to your point, Lori, in terms of, I obviously don't know what the specifics of that specific land that you happened upon.
It's flattened forest. I mean, it was hard to walk over for all the sticks and grubble and tree trunks and just crap that had been left. It was.
Yeah, I mean, if it's state land, if it's state forest land, then it does need to get all sorts of permits, reviews, and so forth in terms of the forestry.
Could have been private, could have been Coles or something like that. I don't know, actually.
Well, I think any cutting of significant size has to go through forest review, forest cutting practice reviews from the state, certainly on state lands. While my understanding is that while some forestry seems to be fairly ugly in terms of clear cutting, there is also some purpose behind that. Certainly if it's in state land, it's done for a reason. Whether you agree with it or not, it depends, but there are reasons to clear cut with regard to getting rid of invasive species, opening up other habitat that is that the state wants to promote, cutting down trees that are destined to be dying pretty quickly because of some of the pests that we have, those sorts of things. So I don't know. I think on state land, it's fairly well regulated. For those reasons, it's not always pretty, but it's done for a purpose.
Okay, let's try to wrap this topic up quickly. About 22 minutes for the education.
Okay.
Students. So Stella and Stephanie.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the calculator included anything, because wood products obviously aren't carbon neutral to produce. Like, I don't know anybody with an electric sawmill or an electric log truck or an electric chipper, like there is an electric chipper coming out this summer, but does the calculator include any of the machine emissions and operating
I don't recall
related
that.
emissions?
I don't recall that. No, I don't recall that. And it'd be interesting to sort of know what scale that is compared to the scale of carbon that we're talking about. But no, I don't recall that, but a good point.
The calculator had a bunch of sliders, but we couldn't play with it. He just showed it on a screen, and he said that he'll maybe be releasing it in a few months. So we didn't get a really detailed accounting of everything that's inside of it.
Stephanie. You're on mute.
I spent my whole meeting muting everybody else that we don't have bleed over in sound. So two things. The first is that the presentation by Jonathan was really fascinating, and I will send you all the link to the meeting after this meeting is over. But if folks are interested, just go to the Town of Amherst, Mass YouTube website, and you will be able to find, there's a link for videos, and you can just go to that video menu, and then you'll see a whole bunch of the town's committee meetings listed, and you can just go by date and scroll through by date. But I will send you all the meeting, because it was the link to the meeting. It was totally fascinating. And I think Jonathan was very open to getting feedback on his calculator. And Stella, I think you especially might really want to take a look at his presentation and look at the calculator he was putting together. And if you have feedback for him, he was really encouraging people to contact him. So I think if there are thoughts you have, definitely reach out. He's very open.
Thanks, Stephanie. Okay, we have 3 topics and we have 20 minutes. Which one's the priority here? Solar bylaw development. There's a poster competition for Puffer's Pond resiliency, and then heat pump panel. Lori, you were reading the last one. Which one?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things that we have to cover. One is the Puffer's Pond letter, since we have a draft of that, but the other is I do need a minute to talk about, because next meeting we're having the panel. So I want to make sure that everybody's ready for that. I have to contact Scott Chernak again and make sure, try to keep his comments to 20 minutes, and then each of us. So if you have a minute, I'll go through that again and just we'll figure out that. But you decide.
Yeah, why don't we do that now?
Okay, so this should be fairly quick. I wanted to get a reading again. Who is planning on, the way I imagine this going is Scott Chernak will give maybe 15 or 20 minutes on heat pumps and what he does and what heat pumps are. But we did a longer heat pump thing a while back, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about heat pumps, right? We want to get to the Q&A as fast as possible. So then I figured a few of us who have done, or as many of us who have done conversions ourselves, should just introduce ourselves quickly, say what we've done, so that people can maybe even contact us later if they want. But then for the next half hour, do a Q&A. Just open it up for questions. Does that sound like a reasonable plan? And who would like to give a 1-minute intro as to who they are and what conversion they've done recently? Let's just
Who's
make
done
it-
conversions in the first place?
I think most of us. So we've got me, we've got Steve, we've got Dwayne, right? Laura. Did I see Jesse? Don,
Yeah, I was the only one who didn't raise my hand, so.
so Stella. Okay, so should all of us just give a quick 1 minute, this is who I am, this is what I did to my house. If your house sounds similar, happy to talk to you about it. Right? Sound like a plan?
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah, how do we get more participants?
I don't know, other than sending we do have to get it. Stephanie, I didn't look, is it on the events calendar yet?
No, it will be.
Okay, so it needs to go on the Amherst events calendar. I have a little local group. I'll send it to people in my neighborhood that I've been sending stuff to.
I can get it on the town's stage as well as an event. I
Is there
can
something
try
you
to
can do with the
highlight that.
front page on the Amherst website, Stephanie?
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. So if we do it as a news item,
Yeah,
I
Okay.
can see if we can do it as a news item.
Okay.
okay.
Anything else, Laura?
And I think that's it. I mean, there's a blurb, you'll see it in the, probably in the calendar. I wrote a little, and it's also on the flyer I sent out last week, a little blurb just saying, that Scott will be giving an intro and the rest of us come talk to your neighbors about their heat pump experiences, right?
Should we prep some questions in advance if the audience does not have any questions or they can't think of questions? Maybe we can, or I can ask those questions to all of you.
Yeah, you want to sort of be MC and.
Yeah, and maybe prep you all, right, for the meeting?
Yeah, so the sorts of concerns that I heard, I can tell you I don't know, maybe other people heard other concerns at the Sustainability Festival where there were a fair number of people who came up to me who had had bad experiences with heat pumps, had had a heat pump installed, or a neighbor had a heat pump installed that never worked right, or it's too noisy, and a lot of them were, early installations, didn't go very well. And so I think some of what we're going to have to do is respond to those sorts of concerns and, make sure that people know about Abode, that they can get consulting help, that they can, that they want to do this. They want to compare quotes. They want to make sure they have an installer that knows what they're about, or they could easily end up with something that won't work very well. So that is still a concern. And that's what I heard most about at Sustainability Festival. What did other people hear?
I heard from 3 or 4 people that were perfectly happy.
Good.
Although
Yeah.
I think at least some of them had expectations that below 20, 30 degrees, they had backup heat. So they weren't expecting the heat pump to do everything.
Right.
So part of it is what their expectations were. But 3 or 4 at least were quite pleased and had no complaints.
Jesse.
I mean, I think, I'm not sure where everyone else stands on this, but I think it's fair to say this is not a one size fits all panacea silver bullet type of solution. It's part of the kit of parts. That's not going to work for every building, every type, and every budget, and every set of expectations. I think it's important, maybe at least for me, that and this technology is evolving as well. With air to water heat pumps are now hitting the residential market as well. So I think I don't like to be, it's really complicated and it's not going to work. I like the story that it's good, but I think it's okay that it doesn't always work. And that those are good lessons moving ahead. And the idea is we try to make good choices, which may or may not be putting heat pumps in every project.
Dwayne?
Yeah, I don't at all want to or suggest that we turn this into an energy efficiency forum, but I think the at least from my experience, the critical first step we did to really get the heat pumps to work effectively and efficiently was to insulate our house. And I forget the percentage, but the huge majority of the cost was paid for by Mass Save. And if you don't do that, you're just not good. And so I'm not sure if the person from the heat pump company would cover that, but at least in my story, in my 1 minute, I would sort of focus on that. But I think it'd be helpful if we also mention that having and it's not a super insulated house, but just getting more insulation in your attic, which is pretty straightforward, is really key. And sort of just to, again, not turn into an energy efficiency event, but to just mention that's really helpful to get the heat pumps to work well.
Don?
Yeah, I actually, Dwayne, in order to get the Mass Save rebate, you've got to go through an audit, and they're going to tell you have to insulate your attic. But I have very, very recent numbers, because and you're absolutely right. Mass Save, of the total project cost of insulation cost of about $4,400, our portion was $700.
Yeah.
So they cover an enormous percentage of it.
So that's pushing Mass Saves and reminding people about Mass Saves is going to, and energy efficiency and insulating is going to be an important part of this discussion. We should keep reminding people of that.
Yeah, and Lori, who do you say is going to be joining us?
Scott Chernak is the owner of Western Mass Heating and Cooling, who coincidentally apparently did all of our conversions. Not that we're doing this to endorse him, but he's very knowledgeable, and we all seem to have come to that decision independently. I think he's done everything.
I use Cerner, actually.
You use Cerner, okay.
Yeah.
Use different one.
So then I'll be the MC for the discussion then. And why don't, if you all can send me a list of questions that you think I should ask, and then you can prep for it. I'll send the consolidated list by next Wednesday. So if you can send me any questions that you can think of by this Friday, is that something that's possible in a couple of days? Or do you need more
That's
time?
fine, but I think mostly we should really try to get people in the audience to ask about their own.
Oh, no, I completely agree. Yeah, if questions are not asked, I just want to ask them, right? And so,
Yeah. I can come up with a bunch, Vasu. That's
okay.
thinking about.
Okay. And then we do have to get the word out about the panel discussion. It's more powerful that way. We have more people. Okay. But yeah, by Friday, please, if you can. Thank you. Okay, the next topic is around the ECAC sponsored poster competition. Stephanie.
Yep. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, we are applying for an MVP grant, an action grant to improve resiliency at the Puffers Pond location. And it's partly improving the pond itself, the water quality, and also the things like the recreational trail that's adjacent to it. There are issues of erosion that are contributing to sedimentation within the pond. So there's a number of things as part of this application that we're looking to. This is really for an engineering study. It's not actually going to be the implementation piece of this, but we have to start with the engineering first. So this is for a technical support to create some kind of engineering study for coming up with a plan to improve the Puffers Pond resiliency, especially in light of the fact that it is one of our only swimmable water bodies in town, and in fact, really in the local area. So one of the things that we'll need to sort of beef up and improve the viability of having this funded is to have some kind of a community engagement piece. And what we talked about with our consultant Fuss and O'Neill, who's helping us with the application, was to have some kind of a poster competition about Puffers Pond, the importance of Puffers Pond in the community, and you know, what it means to our community and also sort of what improved resiliency would mean. So you all were kind of a body that seemed like the likely ones to host that kind of a competition. It would only happen if we received the funding. It's something that would be done over an academic year, so it's not something that would be happening next week. If we get the funding, I think we have, you know, a year and a half with which to sort of complete it, because again, we'd have to do it within the academic year. So I just wanted to know, first of all, are you all on board? It would probably need at least one of you to kind of be the champion. You'd have to, you know, have the competition, and then you'd have to have some judges to vote, and then the final poster would be used in the materials that we do for outreach. So the letter, the attached letter to your packet would need to be signed by Vasu on your behalf. And I do have a deadline. The application is May 4th. So I would need to have you say tonight whether you're on board with doing this. And you don't have to decide who would do it, but generally, are there at least any of you who might be interested in taking the lead on this? And could I get Vasu to sign the letter so that we can include it in the packet next week?
So if I understand correctly, we would be agreeing to run a poster competition that would involve local youth in building a messaging around this, making some sort of message around this project. A way
Correct,
of getting people
exactly.
involved.
Yes.
Yeah, I think-
Yeah, I mean, would it be something that the Hitchcock Center would be able to do?
Well, we were specifically looking for you all because you are the Energy and Climate Action Committee, and this is really a
Okay.
resiliency project.
the town resiliency.
So
project.
we're wanting town support, not
Got it.
the Hitchcock support. I mean, not that we don't want their support. We would love a letter from them too, but specifically, we want to engage the community through, you know, town supported action.
And so this is just in support of your grant application.
Correct.
And
Right.
that would be, I think that's something we should definitely do, and it'd be nice if someone would volunteer to lead it. Preferably not me, but I'll do it if no one else will.
Thanks.
We don't have to volunteer now, I
No,
think, right?
right
So-
now, we just need
yeah.
you to commit to signing the letter, but if we do get the grant funding, then we are going to need to do something with this. And I would certainly help out. It's not like it's going to be completely dumped on you.
Mm.
Right.
Don, you had something, or you're just raising your hand from the previous discussion? Okay,
I'm just raising my hand. And I was actually reading Stephanie's proposed letter so that I knew what I was voting on.
Yeah, and just along those lines, and sorry if I missed it, if you said it, Stephanie, but is your vision that this poster and this effort with the youth would be through either middle school or high school?
Yeah, so it would be through the schools. And it could be specifically for middle school or high school, or it might just be
could
the
be even.
school, you know, the schools in general. I mean, the middle school and high school are regional schools,
Right.
which is fine because, but you know, it might be that we actually maybe want to go through the elementary schools.
And would do you have, or do you think would be pretty safe to say that we could find a teacher or educator at the school to sort of be a mentor within the school to sort of put this together as a science project or something?
Yeah,
Or
I think
art.
yeah,
For art, yeah.
yeah,
art
I was going to
Art,
say
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think the details of that could be worked out later. It's just in general. But I absolutely think we would want to definitely get an educator on board with us to support this effort.
is everybody on board?
I move we support the letter.
Second,
Okay, and in no order, Ragavan,
Yes,
Breger,
Yes.
Goldner,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
D,
yes.
Drucker,
Yes.
Selman,
Yes.
Roof.
Yes.
Thank you all very much.
okay, I'll send you a copy over this by the end of this week, Stephanie. Oh, you need it tonight, you said.
Well, I mean, no, you can, as long as I get it by Friday.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, everybody. Steve, I don't know if we'll have time. We got 3 minutes. to talk about solar bylaw development. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I can hold off on that and put it to a future meeting.
Okay, let's do that. Okay. So
Actually,
for,
can I just
yeah.
raise the topic that I'm thinking of? Partly from Jonathan Thompson's presentation to the Solar Bylaw Working Group that I saw last week, and partly also observing Solar Bylaw Working Group. There's a lot of focus there on creating restrictions on solar. And in anticipation of some maps coming out, both from GZA, but also a statewide map showing where we're going to sort of prefer to put solar, or at least rankings of solar. I'm wondering if there's a way we might consider figuring out ways to incentivize solar in the places that we want it, to sort of counterbalance the zoning bylaws, which restrict solar from places we don't want it. So that's the theme or the idea I'm thinking about in my head, and maybe that's a topic we can discuss at a future meeting.
thanks, Steve. Okay, with the couple of minutes we have, let me just quickly go over the next meeting agenda items. We have the draft letter to the two new DPU members. We've got the Springfield Initiative, Stop the Toxic Pipeline review. And then we've got the heat pump discussion. Lori, how long are you thinking for that discussion?
So the flyers have already been made. It starts at 5:30. It's gonna go, oh wait, the discussion or you're talking about the panel next week?
Yeah,
That's gonna be an hour. So it starts at
Okay.
5:30, ends at 6:30.
okay, so you want it to be an hour, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the solar bylaw development. Okay. Is there anything else that we need to talk about?
If it's okay with everyone, I'll just send everyone another copy of that solar of the flyer for the heat pump panel for you to distribute to your own own communities, if that's okay. No reason not to do that, right, Stephanie? No laws violated there.
As long as you just say do not respond, just send it to everybody.
Everyone.
Just while we have a minute, I just want to say that and if it's okay, I'm sort of jumping in maybe with a little bit of a staff update, but I attended a meeting that the Mass Municipal Association put on open meeting law and public records law, and it was recorded, and I will actually get the link out to everyone because I think it's really interesting in some of the things that were discussed and sort of some of the clarification.
Looser guidelines now, or no? Still
Say that
stringent?
again?
I said looser guidelines or still
Oh,
stringent?
no, they're the same. They're
No.
the same guidelines.
I know.
It's just, and in some ways,
Wishful
they're actually,
thinking.
yeah, in some ways, they're actually a little more stringent,
Oh,
actually.
gosh.
But
Okay.
yeah, but it was just interesting. It was interesting. It was a lot of information delivered very, very quickly. But I think, yeah, it was just helpful. But they had slides. I'll forward both the presentation as well as the slides so that you'll have the whole package and you can sort of go through it. I haven't even had time to really go through the slides yet. They talked very quickly, skipped over a lot. So there's a lot to it. But
Thanks.
I think it might be helpful.
Laura?
Yeah, just maybe for a future meeting as well, and maybe it's related to Steve's point and we could combine the two, but I think I emailed everybody about the Climate Action Now group hosting the new chief climate person. I was able to attend for a little bit. It was a good meeting. But I was sort of frustrated that we didn't get invited to it. And I just feel like there's this weird dynamic in town where there's like the climate activists and somehow we're different. Like I even asked to join one of the groups and I was told they didn't want political people involved. And I'm like, how am I a political person? I'm just on this committee. So like, I just feel like, or maybe I am a political person, but I can also be a climate activist on the side, right? It was just a strange thing. So I don't know how we can maybe get maybe there's some kind of outreach we could do. Maybe there's a joint meeting we could host somehow to sort of get us focused on. We have a lot of people focused on this issue, which is great, how do we move that to be positive? Like, how do we move it to be focused on where do we want to put the solar that we want to put? We all agree with that. Like, that's an easy thing to do. We should be working on that together. So anyway, just throwing that out there. I don't know what it would look like, but I think there's something we could potentially do there.
Yeah, good point, Laura. I think it's important. Let me think about that. Unless anybody else has some thoughts on what we could do.
What was the status? Where do we end with we should really go on, but one thing maybe we should discuss later is where do we end with this adopting the specialized code question? Because there are now 16% of the state has now adopted it and we're still haven't.
Yeah, I've not heard back, and I've emailed the town manager. And he responded as well.
Okay, we can talk about that another time. We should move on to the EV 101.
But we don't have, what was his name? We don't have a representative from Green Consumers Alliance
Uh-oh.
yet.
They're coming. There was just a mix up about the link, so they're on their
Okay.
way. I just sent it to them again. So maybe do staff updates or ECAC updates, and I'll work with them offline here.
Do we,
So they're joining now. They're still joining, right? Stephanie, you said?
Yes, they're coming. They were just having
Okay.
trouble with the link. So
Okay.
just let
Thank
me do this offline.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sounds good. Laura?
to Lori's point, so are you looking for, is it the town council that needs to act on this?
Yeah, the town manager and the town council need
Correct.
to adopt the new specialized code.
Well, I mean, but who needs to act first?
I think it's the council, Jesse, correct, right? That's how it would work. They would have to, that's the part of the process, right?
Right, the town council has to vote on it. They have to
Yeah.
adopt it as a bylaw.
Yep.
Have we heard it all from
Yes.
Alicia, who's our new liaison, or have you reached out to her?
I reached out to her as well. Yes.
And we haven't heard anything.
And Jesse, did you talk to Alicia as well? I mean, this was,
I tried.
okay,
I've tried many times.
okay. Let me reach out to Alicia.
Could you just share, Vasu, the email you've sent or whatever, then we can adapt it and send it to our other town
Yeah,
councilors?
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Any ECAC member updates? I got one. My term ends in June. Actually, I mentioned it to everybody who I met on Saturday. And then I do not intend on extending my term. So that means the chair is vacant and we need another member from the community. So yeah, it's been awesome, fantastic to learn from you all. And I thank you for the opportunity. That's my one update. Stella, you had an update? Dwayne?
No, Vasu, I presume Stephanie is aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. And appreciate your service for sure.
Yeah, just to echo what was the sustainability fair. Thank you so much, Vasu. I was still a little bit hung up on what Laura said. I wonder if there's a way to encourage a representative from one of those groups to apply to be on this committee.
So I talked, well, I don't know about climate action now, but I talked to one person. But if he was on other committees, I'll do that. If you have people that you can recommend, let me know. I'll do that.
I also just want to go on record for anybody who may be listening, just like that. As some of you know, I have a history of pretty escalated direct action as an activist on other issues. And my personal feeling is also that a volunteer committee is not like a conflict of interest with activism.
No,
So
not
if
at all.
anybody's listening and considering applying to be on this committee, I would encourage them to do that.
There is already a fair amount of overlap between this committee and, local energy advocates and Mothers Out Front and.
Yeah, there is. They have their own education series going on, and yeah, slightly different set of goals.
But there are people
Yeah.
who are members of both.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very important topic, Laura. Thank you for bringing that up. I think, in fact, hugely important, like how we engage with everyone and sort of bridge building and collaborating seems just critical. So yeah, so whoever is listening, that is the goal.
And if folks-
And Laura, could you send me the contact or some people in Climate Action Now? I know people in ACJA, but I can reach out.
I think we have at least one new attendee, and I think we should just point out again that we're just a little late getting the green, the EV 101 person online. There was some trouble with the link, but they should be here momentarily.
Thanks, Laura.
Did you guys see the Celtics game last night?
So-
Very upsetting.
Very, yeah, a tough ending for sure. But big hockey game tonight.
You know, we should probably open it up. Why don't we open it up for comments from the last thing on the agenda is comments from the.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's going to be some additional comments after the EV 101 as well.
Oh,
But
we
yeah,
just
sure. I mean,
lost someone.
any questions from the community? Please raise your hand. Stephanie, you would have to unmute.
I think I saw her on the phone. Oh, there she
Uh-oh.
is. Okay.
Oh, there's Michael. Okay, good.
Hi, Laura, thanks so much for informing people that you can't judge their wallet by whether they have solar panels on their roof or not. That was very important to make that point. I just want to ask you people, now that the survey has been completed, it appeared to me that there was disappointment on some of your parts. And I'm wondering why. And I'm wondering if there's a plan for the future now that you have this information. I'm looking at the biggest part of this survey and seeing that 90% of the people who responded said they wanted to see large-scale solar on rooftops and canopies. There was absolutely no support as a most preferred option for forests. It was close to 3%. And then when you got down to the point where people were forced to do unbuilt environment, once again, the forest portion of that was one of the smallest. I can't read the percentage, but it looks like it's single digits. And when it came to the second category, it wasn't much bigger. So it's really clear to me that the people who responded to your survey that you put together have given you a strong message. They're saying they want to see solar on rooftops and canopies. And they're also saying they do not want to see it in forest land. And yet I saw members of the committee kind of to brush off the information, questioning how many people took the survey, who were the people that took the survey, were they homeowners, were there enough people who were renters or non-renters, as if there was some kind of qualification that you had to have in order to take the survey. So basically, I just want to ask you again, what's the plan now? You spent a lot of time, money, and effort in putting this survey together to get the people of the community to share their opinions with you. You now have their opinions. And I'm wondering what's going to happen next. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And Laura, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to clarify, it was not our survey. It was the town survey. That's an important point. And I don't want to speak on behalf of ECAC, but I think what we were talking about there in terms of how do we would all agree, like we want I think our preferred approach is to put as much solar on rooftops, canopies, and other places as possible. And this is the message we've been sharing for many, many months now. So I think we just want to figure out how to move that forward. I think the other point that we're not making ourselves, but that the Massachusetts roadmap makes is that we are going to need some solar on some land. To Dwayne's point, maybe that's open land. Maybe that's the meadow entering Amethyst Brooks and not somewhere else, right? But we need to be open as a community to have those discussions. So I think what I think we want, any concern I have about this survey is frankly, to the point you just made, that someone's going to take the results and say, this clearly means we can't put any solar on land, because I just don't think that's going to allow us to meet our goals.
Thanks, Laura. Steve?
And I would just say that I'm very intrigued by the survey results. We saw a summary of that today. And I think it's premature for us to have a plan after a few minutes after hearing a summary of it. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing the specific results that'll be released in the report. And the other very important part of what GCA is doing, which is their mapping across the town. So all of these are very important components that will become part of a strategy or a plan as we move forward. So we're not dismissing it, but any survey does have to be looked at critically, and we still need to do that.
Yeah, well said, Steve. A couple of Renee. Renee had a question, Stephanie.
Go ahead, Renee, you can unmute.
Sorry, I had to unmute. Just jumping in on this, since it seems like it's a little bit of a back and forth conversation here. Before, I mean, we didn't get to talk about item number 6 on the agenda, and Steve talked about it for a little bit, and he talked about incentives for building on canopies and on rooftops. And we now have a new administration, we have a new climate chief. Maybe there's hope for that, and that, we know that often people say it's just too expensive to do canopies and rooftops, but we also can perhaps require new construction to have solar. So we have some new options. We need to look at this as the survey informed us about how the community is feeling. We have a new governor, we have a new climate chief. We've never had a climate chief before. I think we should just hope that we can get different kinds of incentives coming from the state that will encourage the kind of development we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Okay, I'm going to stop for just a second because I think we do have Devin. We were having some technical difficulty where Devin could actually see and hear us, but was nowhere to be found in the panelists or attendees. It was very strange, but finally we got you in. So
I'm here. Thank you. I appreciate all of your help.
yeah, so sorry about that. That was very strange.
That is a-okay. Are you all ready for me to do the presentation, or should I wait, or?
No, yes, we are. We're waiting for you. Thanks for joining.
Okay, great. Let me just pull it up quickly. I will share my screen. Okay. Okay, well. Thank you, everybody, especially Stephanie, for your help in getting me here today. So my name is Devin DeLibero, and I am the program coordinator for the Drive Green team at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Green Energy Consumers is a nonprofit that's based in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, whose mission it is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. We do that in both policy and advocacy work, but then also in our programmatic work like Drive Green. Ignore that slide. And so why did we choose electric vehicles to focus on with our mission? Well, we chose it because we found that transportation is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases, and we wanted to do whatever we could to bring that notch down a little bit. So that's why we chose to focus on electric vehicles. To go along with that theme, your typical gas-powered car emits 381 grams of CO2 emissions per mile in New England, and that's pretty steep. As you go to a plug-in hybrid model, that's a model with a car with an electric range and then a gas backup that moves to about 176 CO2 emissions per mile. And then for a battery electric vehicle, that's even better. It's a fancy way of saying an all electric vehicle at 96 grams of CO2 emissions per mile. And then this is a plug that my executive director makes me put in here for our Green Powered program. So if you sign up for Green Powered, you could essentially be running on no emissions. We are based in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, but I will go with just the Massachusetts information for the purposes of this webinar. So you can see here that transportation accounts for 42% of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts. And now that's not just your personal vehicle, it's all types of transportation. But again, anything we can do to move that needle down is what we're looking to do. And EVs can do that. And then just to further that life cycle emissions, they are very different from gas-powered cars to electric vehicles. It is true that in the initial manufacturing process, EVs do have a greater carbon footprint because they have that necessary battery manufacturing piece. But once you reach about a year or two into driving the car, you'll see that they they're like on parity, and then the gasoline cars continue to emit far more than the electric versions of those cars. For a gas car, I think it's about 21,000 miles, and for an electric truck, it's about 17,000 miles before they reach that parity point. So EVs are also great for public health reasons. If you have an all-electric vehicle, there are no particulate matters coming out of the tailpipe. If you have a plug-in hybrid, there are less, but still some. They are also cleaner even if you take electricity generation into account. There are a lot of clean municipal aggregation communities within Massachusetts that have a very high standard of green renewables in their electricity mix. But also Massachusetts has a renewable energy standard, which requires the utilities to put more and more green renewables on the grid every year. And, you know, as we know, climate change itself is a public health threat, and we have followed closely the American Lung Association. They come out with different reports every year. And this one in particular is zeroing on Healthy Air Report. And this report assumes two things, which is important to know if you're interested, is one, that all of the cars will be electric, and two, that the electricity needed to power those cars will be all renewable. But if we were to live in that utopian society where that would be to happen, you would see in Massachusetts $18 billion in health benefits, and you would avoid about 1,600 premature deaths, 35,000 asthma attacks, and almost 200,000 lost work days. So you can see it really does make a difference. We're not quite there yet where we're all renewables on our grid and all EVs, but we could get there eventually. Efficiency is actually a real key point between gas cars and electric cars, because efficiency in gas cars is really not great. It's around like 12 to 30% of energy from the fuel is used to drive the car down the road, which just means that you're really losing money when you put when you're trying to fuel your vehicle. So you can see here from the diagram that engine losses account for 68 to 72% of such losses. Conversely, in an electric car, those vehicles are about 60 to 73% efficient. And that's depending upon the drive cycle as well. If you put on the regenerative braking mode, that could get you up to 77% to 100% efficient. And for those of you who don't know, regenerative braking is when you take your foot off the accelerator and it slows the car down more than it would if you took your foot off the the gas pedal. And so what that does is it doesn't use your brake, but it uses like these fancy magnets that slow down the car and then put energy back into the battery of your car, thus extending your range, which is why it can be super efficient. Also, people just really like regenerative braking mode. So then more about efficiency. So you can see that really strongly in miles per gallon or miles per gallon electric. I think that's probably like the biggest indicator for folks. You'll see on the right-hand side of this graph that we have the Ford F-150 and other like very popular gas cars. Their MPG is pretty low. And then once you move to your regular hybrids without a plug, gets a little bit better, still not amazing, but pretty good. And then you get your plug-in hybrids and the MPGE is just like skyrockets away. So, you know, the Toyota Prius Prime has as much as 133 MPGE. And it even eclipses all of the battery electric vehicles somehow. I don't know how, but it does. But the battery electric vehicles generally have a greater MPGE than all of the other categories. So really, it'll affect your wallet as well, which is a deciding factor with a lot of folks. And then there's fuel costs. So typically speaking, we like to say that it costs you less to drive on a mile of electricity than it does on a mile of gasoline. However, rates went kind of crazy over the winter. So for the first time since my 5.5 years working here, that has not been the case. So for National Grid and Eversource customers, you're paying 14 cents per mile and 11 cents per mile respectively. Whereas the average gallon of gasoline in Massachusetts as of earlier this month was $3.56, which meant that the average, the mile you pay per, the mile on gasoline is 11 cents, almost 12 cents per mile. So you're really not saving anything at the moment. Now these prices will change soon if some haven't already. So it will be a little bit different. They are projected to fall a lot in the summer. So we'll see. But right now, unfortunately, if you're a National Grid customer, you're not saving anything. But if you're an Eversource customer, at least it's like at the same level. And if you want to know more about how we came up with this math and the equations that we did, you can check out our fuel cost page here. So the takeaways for this is we know fuel savings aren't that great right now. They're not existent for some folks, but the electricity prices will change every 6 months. What electricity utility you have matters, whether that be Eversource, National Grid, if you have like a municipally owned utility, or if you are in an aggregation community. But one thing to remember, even if electricity prices are high, is that you will still have maintenance savings and potentially have access to free charging, which I'll talk about in a sec. Also, if anyone has any questions, feel free to just chime in. Okay, so for maintenance, like I said, EVs cut maintenance costs in half and repair costs in half.
Sorry, Devon,
Yeah.
Laura had a question.
Sorry, I moved everyone's faces so I couldn't see them, so I could see all the slides. Laura, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. And I also was on video because I moved downstairs to make dinner. I think you kind of answered it with your last point, but that's assuming you're charging at home.
Yes.
Okay.
But you don't have to, and we'll talk about that in the latter half of the presentation. Okay, let me just move you all so I can see if somebody raises their hands. Okay, so maintenance. We've been saying maintenance and repairs costs are cut in half for EVs for like years, and then in 2020, Consumer Reports came out with this fancy little report that says backed up all the things we've been saying for years. So I'll tell you what we have to say, but definitely check out this report if you're interested. So EVs have far fewer moving parts compared to a gas engine vehicle. But again, that's for battery electric vehicles. So all electric vehicles. So there's fewer things then to maintain or repair. So that's a big savings right there. The battery, motor, and electronics require very little maintenance. And when we're talking about maintenance, people in particular are worried about the battery for electric vehicles. And we tell people you don't really have to worry about that because these batteries are designed to last the lifetime of the vehicle, and the manufacturers are very confident in that fact. They have 8-year, 100,000 warranties on most vehicles, if not better warranties. So definitely something to look into if you're worried about that. I mentioned regenerative braking before. It does protect the brakes, which means you don't have to repair your brakes or replace them as often. And then just in general, EVs save on total cost of ownership, and which includes depreciation, financing, resale prices, that sort of thing. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can check out that link. I believe Stephanie has the slides. Excuse me. A little bit more on maintenance. So the bottom, you'll see ICE, HEV, PHEV, BEV. That stands for internal combustion engine vehicle or gas car. HEV is like the hybrid electric vehicle. It's the hybrid without the plug. PHEV is plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and then BEV is battery electric vehicle. So going from left to right, you'll see that there is a significant decrease in maintenance costs. The BEVs, or the battery electric vehicles, have none of those like reddish, pinkish things, and few of those like purple things. So it does add up. The maintenance costs can really save you over the long run. You'll notice that the plug-in hybrid isn't as great of a savings. That's because it still has all those moving parts like a gas engine, like a regular gas car, because it's like a combination of both. But generally speaking, you can save a lot over with maintenance costs. And then we like to say, you know, they're fun to drive. Here's a collage of a lot of our, we call them EV ambassadors. They're people who like to volunteer with us. They can be really fast. And they're also really quiet and just generally pretty cool and interesting stuff. Any questions before I move on? And then we'll talk about all the things that we think you should know regarding electric vehicles. So when someone's first considering an electric vehicle, they're new to the space, range anxiety is something that comes up quite a bit. And we like to say that it is a thing of the past for a few different reasons. So for one, there are a lot more new models of battery electric vehicles that are coming out every year that have higher and higher ranges, or greater and greater ranges. I just saw a report recently that said EVs are trending to be on average of 30 miles of range. I'm sorry, 300 miles of range soon. So it's definitely doable. And there are models out there that have more than 300 miles of range. So you can really do whatever you need to do. If that still doesn't assure you, you can definitely choose to go with a plug-in hybrid model. There's plenty to choose from. And like the Toyota Prius Prime, the Toyota RAV4 Prime, those are two of my favorites. They have a good amount of electric range. And then they have also that gas backup, so you can have that security and that peace of mind. Another reason why we say it's a thing of the past is because of all the infrastructure that's being built out. So there's money coming from the federal government for infrastructure in Massachusetts and throughout the United States. And then the utilities, the main utilities, Eversource and National Grid, are really committed to building out the infrastructure in the state. The funding that they have for their infrastructure programs far surpasses the federal money coming in. So if you don't see a lot of chargers in your community yet, you should expect to see some in the coming years, in the coming next couple of years. There'll be a lot.
Have you heard any concerns about all-wheel drive? Most of the battery vehicles, I think, except Tesla, are rear-wheel drives, I think.
No, so a lot of them are front-wheel drive. You have the occasional rear-wheel drive. I don't know why it always trips me up to say rear-wheel drive. But there's a lot more that are coming online that are all-wheel drive right now. And so I would suggest, if you're like curious, I would take a peek at our website. We have an EV shopping tool, and you can filter by the drivetrain. And there's plenty that have all-wheel drive right now. The problem with that is the reason why I think the manufacturers didn't want to do that at first is because it cuts down on efficiency and your range. But now I think that the battery technology has gotten better, and they've seen that like they can do all-wheel drive. They've started to do it. So you can definitely find those out there. I mean, I wouldn't get a rear-wheel drive car though, just for the snow.
Thank you.
Okay, so we talked about this. The average range approaches 300 miles in the US for EVs. So stay tuned. It's not just Tesla. There are other models out there. So be on the lookout. This is probably one of everyone's favorite topics, is charging. And it's not that hard. It's just like a little bit of a switch of mindset. So it's really easy to just plug in at night when you go home, or plug in when you're out and doing your errands. There are 3 basic levels of charging: level 1, level 2, and DC fast charging. Level 1 and level 2 use a J1772 port that you see in the top right of the screen. So level 1 is your typical 110 volt outlet. That's something you could use to charge your phone with. So that gets you 2 to 6 miles of range per hour. And that's fine for some folks. They really make do. They only have like a normal commute of like not that many miles. But other folks, that's just not enough. So you can get a level 2 station charging station installed in your home. You can also find these around town. And these are 220 volt outlets. You can just get an electrician to install for you. And they can get you anywhere from 11 to 54 miles of range per hour. This varies so much because there's it depends on the charging rate of the onboard charger, which can change from vehicle to vehicle. Then there's DC fast charging, which uses the other 2 ports you see on your screen here. The J1772 combo, also known as CCS, is the most common port that you'll find out there. It used to be just for American and European cars, and Asian manufacturers tended towards the CHAdeMO ports, but they're slowly seeing how the tides have turned, and they're moving towards the J1772 combo port. So you can filter also on our shopping tool to see what DC fast charging port your car has, or the car you're looking for has. We did put an example here of 90 miles in 30 minutes, and it's because we can't really put an accurate range here because it really varies from car to car, and it varies based on the charging station that you're using, the output that it can put out, and then also what your car can accept. So it's limited by those 2 factors, and it could really change. But generally speaking, it'll charge your car very fast. I have not talked about Tesla. I won't really talk too much about Tesla, only and to say it has its own proprietary port and own proprietary network, which is a really great advantage for folks who are Tesla drivers. If you are someone who doesn't want to be a Tesla driver but wants to take advantage of their charging station network, well, you'll be in luck, because soon I think that will make sure that you can charge any car at their charging stations in the next couple of years. They already have a few stations that they've been piloting, so you should see more come online soon. And this is the part where I'm going to tell you about all the different apps that you can use to find charging on the go. So you can, PlugShare is probably the biggest one that we like to tell people about. It is a crowdsourced app. So there are a lot of different charging stations within this that are networked. So it covers all the network charging stations. And it'll tell you things like, does this charging station cost me anything? Is it in disrepair? Does it usually have a line? Is there a good coffee place nearby? Like any random thing you could potentially want to know, you can find out on PlugShare. Another popular one is ChargePoint. ChargePoint is one of the bigger networked charging station networks in New England, so definitely check them out. And then the third one is a Better Route Planner, which for folks who want to plan out road trips, it's great. It factors in like weather. It factors in whether if you like really packed your car with a lot of weight, like all these things you wouldn't think of that could change your efficiency. And it also helps plan your route charging stations. And just for context, the green is level 2 charging stations and the orange is DC fast charging. So lots in Eastern Mass. Western Mass could use a little love, but still has a lot. And then for folks who want to install a level 2 charging unit at their home, we have created this guide that can help you. It helps you determine your charging needs, like whether you really need a level 1 or a level 2, how to pick your charging station unit, and what you need an electrician for. So for an electrician, they can do this work relatively easily as long as there's no extenuating circumstances. It should only cost you about $1,200 with the unit and their work combined. And then as far as the charging station unit goes, there's different ratings. I would look at the NEMA ratings in particular, and you don't have to get it installed in a garage. You can get it installed like externally on your house. That works too. Whatever you need it to be done, wherever you need it to be put. And then you might say, that's cool, but I don't own my own single family home or live in a single family home. We have a guide for apartment and condo folks. This is something that you can just simply hand to like a property manager or property owner and say, like, this lays out why this is good for you to do and why this is a great amenity for folks. So it'll tell them the difference between like non-network charging stations and network charging stations and what that means, touch upon any incentives, things like that. Okay. Here's where it gets a little complicated because this is the new clean vehicle credit, which is the federal tax credit that was updated recently. So if you have questions, feel free to interrupt. So this program is valid through 2032. And one of the first things it did was remove the 200,000 unit cap that it had placed on manufacturers previously, which meant that manufacturers could only sell 200,000 electric vehicles before the tax credit phased out for their cars. That's no longer. This is a website from the IRS where you can find all of the manufacturers and models that have the federal tax credit that apply for the federal tax credit. I said that. Now there's income requirements. So if you are a joint filer, it's $300,000 or less, and for individual filers, it's $150,000. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles are now included, which they were not in the past. And there will be new vehicle requirements, which we'll talk about in a second. And this VIN lookup tool. So I'm going to talk about a lot of different things that are required for the federal tax credit now. And then once you think your vehicle has hit all of these things, you should still look it up using this VIN lookup. So let's talk about it. One of the first requirements is the assembly location. The assembly location has to be in North America now. And you can, again, use that VIN lookup tool. There is an MSRP price cap now. So it's $80,000 for SUVs, vans, and pickup trucks, and $55,000 for sedans and hatchbacks. Now I want to point out that this is MSRP based, not the actual like price you pay at the dealership. So if you found an SUV that has an MSRP of $75,000, but the dealership upcharges you and you end up paying like $85,000, your vehicle is still eligible for the tax credit because it's based on the MSRP and not the final price. And then there's the battery requirements, which split this up into two buckets, the money up into two buckets. So it's $3,750 and $3,750. So you have to hit all these requirements I just talked about, plus now these battery requirements. So there's a mineral requirement and then the battery component requirement. Both are set at certain percentages, which then have to ramp up over time. And the manufacturers have to meet these requirements in order for the vehicle to then qualify for the tax credit. And if you want to know like more about that, we have that listed on our website, the requirements and how it ramps up and things like that. Now, if you want to see what vehicles qualify for that federal tax credit, you can go to the U.S. Department of Energy's website. They have the whole list of the vehicles that qualify. I will warn you, it is not long. All of these requirements have made it so this list is pretty short. It is not a a list that doesn't move. There's cars added to it all the time. This was just announced on the 18th, and since then we've already seen the Volkswagen ID4 added to the list. So there will be more cars added to this list as time goes on. So stay tuned. And also maybe just do your research before considering buying a car, and just check which one would be available for the tax credit and which one could potentially be available for the tax credit in the future. So you'll see here, they list things like the assembled in North America, MSRP limit, and then the credit amount. Okay. Like I said, this list will change over time. So manufacturers will change their supply chains in order to qualify. There is a lot of federal funding available for manufacturers to apply for, to build factories in North America and figure out their manufacturing of their batteries in North America. There's also free trade agreements to consider, and some of the battery requirements doesn't have to just be from North America, but a country that has a free trade agreement with North America. And so the United States is still considering more of those. Again, we have a lot more of this in detail on our website. Like I said before, battery requirements will ramp up every year. And then new vehicle models will come out. And so there'll be more that qualify for this tax credit, but it might be slow going at first. Now, there is a loophole. It's kind of weird. So the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, created this commercial vehicle tax credit, which does not have the same eligibility requirements as the clean vehicle credit. So what this means is that basically the dealership can decide to buy the vehicle and then lease it out to the consumer. So by buying the vehicle, they can get because they're commercial business, they can get the tax credit that's separate from the tax credit I just told you about, and then put it towards a leasing agreement for the customer. It's all very shady and very silly. But if you want to potentially lease a vehicle, this is maybe the option that you want to go with. I'm just trying to lay out everything for folks. If you want more information on that, definitely follow up with me, and I can go over that through email. Laura.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. I do have to run in a few minutes for a different meeting, so I will have to leave early, but I just wanted to quickly share my experience. So we do lease a Kona, which looks like it's shown right here. That's not me. But we've had it now it'll be 2 years in August. Unrelated to this potential loophole, we decided to lease because we knew that there were more and more vehicles coming out every year, and we didn't want to necessarily commit to one for a long period of time. Also because the rebate gets applied to you don't get the rebate in your tax credit, it gets applied at the dealership, or the dealership gets it, right? So it kind of like made our payments pretty low, like the lease payments were really low. So that was great for us. The point I actually wanted to make is more around the charging. So we actually have not installed a level 2. We still just use our regular plug, and that's worked fine for us for 2 years. We do have another car that's gas powered, so that helps. But and I do drive it occasionally to Boston, and there's a lot of chargers particularly in the parking garages in Boston that make it kind of easy. You pay to park and then you get some free charging, so it's kind of a nice deal. But I just wanted to let folks know that it is possible to putter around town and not have to install the more expensive charger if you plug it in overnight.
Totally. And I've heard of a lot of other folks who are just fine with their level 1 charger. So it is doable. Okay. So now there is a used vehicle tax credit where there used to just be a new vehicle tax credit. This is the link to the IRS website where you can find the manufacturers and models that qualify. What's really just great about this is you don't have to worry about any of the battery requirements that I just talked about. The tax credit is $4,000 or 30% of the sale price, whichever is lower. You do have to buy from like a real dealership, not just like a Craigslist person. And it has to be at least 2 years old, which is not hard, and then cost $25,000 or less, which makes that a little difficult because EVs do hold on to their prices, and the car market's a little steep right now. It only applies to the first resale. So if someone bought the car used before you and they got it, you can't get it for that car. And it does have a lower income threshold. So it's $150,000 for joint filers and $75,000 for individual filers. And we'll talk about this in a second, but you can combine this with some state rebates as well. My favorite part of the federal tax credit is this. So in 2024, don't know exactly when, but sometime in 2024, there will be a point of sale rebate. So the consumer can choose to transfer the tax credit to the dealership. So you get that money taken off the top right away instead of it being dependent upon your personal tax liability. So it's really more of like an equalizer for folks. The details of this program are still TBD. I think the government purposely gave themselves a lot of time to figure this out. Now, talk about the state rebates. So More EV is the state rebate. There are 2 columns here because things are changing soon and we have some information regarding the changes. So as of right now, you can get $3,500 for a battery electric vehicle, that's an all electric vehicle, and $1,500 for a plug-in hybrid with 25 miles of range or more. But the final purchase price has to be $55,000 for a battery electric vehicle and $50,000 for a plug-in hybrid. You can purchase or lease this vehicle, but the lease terms have to be at least 36 months. And you have to apply online at the More EV website. I think it's 90 days from the day you purchased it. And it can be purchased both in and outside of Massachusetts. What I will tell you all, if you're looking to buy a vehicle right now, is expect it to be a long process. It will take some time. You're going to have to like pre-order your vehicle. You might not even be able to find a vehicle to test drive. It's really frustrating. I know someone who put an order in January for a vehicle and it still hasn't been accepted by the manufacturer yet. So it can take some time, or you might luck out depending on the vehicle you're looking for. Coming soon, so July 1 is the target for this. The rebate is going to change up a little bit, so it'll be anywhere from $3,500 to $5,000. Unfortunately, the plug-in hybrids will no longer qualify, but it will apply to both new and used vehicles, and the used vehicle part is brand new, so we're excited about that. There will be additional rebates for low-income drivers and cars and people trading in gas cars. And what's great is that you can stack all of these. So it's not just you get one or the other, you can stack them all.
Okay, quick time, sorry, stop you there. Just a quick time check here. Our meeting wraps up at 6:30, so I don't know how many more slides you have, but if we can wrap it up in another 3 to 4 minutes and make sure that the public has any additional comments.
Right. Okay. And then what's different about this rebate is that it is an authorized point of sale instead of applying and get it a couple months from then. And then, like I said before, you should really check out our website. This is our shopping tool, so you can compare and contrast all the different models, maybe get set up with a dealership in your area and just compare and contrast everything and see what you're looking for. And that's it. I'm going to stop sharing. Does anyone have any questions?
Or does the public have any questions? Please raise your hand.
It's a lot of stuff to throw at you in one little presentation. Michael?
Yes, thank you. That was an incredible presentation, and thanks for ECAC for putting it on. I don't think I've ever heard anything as comprehensive on the topic. Just terrific. I was wondering one thing that maybe you're aware of, and I'm curious about how this might be dealt with. One of the things that's missing now that more and more electric cars are on the road is the fact that they're not paying a gas tax. And I'm sure, as you know, Massachusetts has a high gas tax. It's about 25 cents a gallon. The federal one is just under it. I think it's around 20 cents a gallon. That money is being used to replace bridges and roads, and even some of it's being used for mass transportation. Obviously, if everyone's driving an electric car, all that money goes away, and yet you still have the same needs for fixing the roads. I'm wondering if you know of anything that's in the works presently to start dealing with that issue, because there's more electric cars out there, and those people, you know, Amherst is always concerned about fair share, right? Well, those people aren't paying their fair share of the road upkeep. So I wonder if you hear of any initiatives to somehow tax these electric cars so that they're paying their fair share of road maintenance and highway maintenance and bridge repairs.
Unfortunately, I'm more of a program person and not a policy person, so I don't know the answer to that question. I could definitely ask that of some of my coworkers, though.
Yeah, it's just one of the issues that's coming up with that. I didn't expect you to have all the answers, though. You pretty well had every single one as far as how electricity is being used in vehicles and what the choices are. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Anybody else? So I had one question. Do you have data from RMV about vehicle types owned by residents in Massachusetts? I've tried to get that data, and Stella, I know you tried as well. Do you have that data to see?
I don't. It's not as easily released as you would think. I think if you were interested in it, you could contact the folks at More EV. They could have it based on like who's applied for the rebate. I personally work in Rhode Island, and they have it right like on the Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources website, but they don't in Massachusetts.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is that we want to know what to go after, right? We know residential emissions are high. Transportation, I think in Amherst is, I think 15 to 20% of contributions. So is it a key priority for the town? And having that data would be really helpful. So if you, I don't know if Stephanie, if you can, or if you can email Stephanie with a contact at More EV, I'll be happy to connect.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your time. And
Yeah,
the presentation was great.
Sure.
Thank you.
And thanks for your
everybody.
patience, Devin.
Oh, thanks for all your help. I appreciate that.
Sure.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
You too. Bye.
Good night.
Thanks.
Okay. Any closing comments from the public or from ECAC? We have an agenda for next week. I think we're good with everything, right? Stephanie, we talked about, let me just summarize it. Draft letter to the two new DPU members. We have Stop the Toxic Pipeline review. heat pump discussion, please send me questions by this Friday, and then I'll email all of you by around Tuesday or Wednesday next week with questions, and so you can prepare for it. And then Steve on the solar bylaw development. And then we all have an action to just connect with our town council about specialized stretch code. Just an action for everybody on an agenda item. Anything else? Jesse?
Do we need to elect a new chair?
No. Nope, not yet. You're not ready for that. That doesn't happen till, so technically.
You want to get
Vasu-
rid of me already?
I know I'm not ready for this.
No, technically Vasu is with the committee. His last day would be, or June 30th is when his term officially ends. So you
Alright.
wouldn't have your election until the following meeting.
Can't believe this, Jesse. Already voting me out.
We're all in, actually, we're in denial. So Vasu, I know you always ask, so I just wanted to give you a heads up that you had 5 participants at this meeting.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then I was for our meeting next week or in 2 weeks about the heat panel discussion or heat pump discussion. Just make sure you're connecting with anybody you know. We need to improve our participation in these meetings in public. I think we started off these meetings with 18 to 20 people, and then it's just waned. So please reach out. I think it's important. Still.
Just as far as like managing your expectations with Sue, I don't think it's going to get better as the weather gets warmer.
It's true. Yeah, I was actually thinking about the about solar education, and maybe it could be outdoors, right? And we can take a look at Steve, Hampshire College, right? Could be something we could do.
What would it look like to have our meetings outdoors with a pizza budget?
I'd go for
I'll
that.
take that as a.
BYOP.
I think the requirement now is that we would have to have a hybrid meeting, so I don't think we can exclusively, you would have to maybe do a retreat or something that gets posted and do something separate, but to have your regular meeting, it either has to be via Zoom or hybrid. There's no fully in-person meeting
Okay.
right now.
I also think the great thing about remote is we can always encourage people to watch the YouTube videos, which are online, you know? So drawing people's attention to that, I think, is always good.
Yeah, I think you have people who visit the site and look at the education series separately from the meeting. So, because they are posted now. So, and I think I have to get this one and the last one up have to get posted. So I'll do that. There was one other thing I wanted to say, which I totally forgot. Oh, vacation schedules. I think if folks can get me your anticipated summer vacation schedules, that would be very helpful. I would say through September, if sometimes people travel in September, October even, not you academics, but others. So if you could just get me your schedules, that would be really helpful. And I'll put together a main schedule, and then I can figure out if we would have, there's any meetings that we won't have a quorum.
Mhm.
Okay, great.
I'm
Thanks,
just going to
Stephanie.
add, I'm
Oh,
happy
yeah.
to do a special meeting or tour of the Hampshire College solar facilities if anybody ever wants to check them out up close.
We should definitely do that, Steve. Especially after the results from the survey, right? They want more education.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay.
All
Thank you all,
right,
everybody.
thanks,
All right. Thanks,
Right.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
2 weeks. Bye.